This is Hillary Kwiatek, and welcome to So You Want to Be on a Game Show. Thank you to everybody who's joining us tonight. Thank you to folks who have donated already. If you haven't and you feel so moved, the link to the donation is in it's pinned in the chat, I believe. Our wonderful producer, Jen Dedrick, will be monitoring the chat. If you have any questions as the evening goes on, be sure to put them in the chat, and then she'll take a look at those and we will answer those. Before I bring in our first guest, I promised no politics tonight, but I did want to say, some of you don't know that I was actually on Jeopardy. It was a while ago. It was back in 2013, and I came in second. And I started thinking about what is similar about being a Jeopardy contestant versus being a candidate. And they have a lot of similarities, right? So in Jeopardy, there are 3 people up there. Only one can win. So, every game, 2 people are going home. Now, in my election for city council, we have 5 candidates for 4 seats. So one person is going to go home, so to speak, in game show parlance. And so hopefully it won't be me. If you live in Bethlehem and you can vote for me in the primary, I sure hope you will. And so in a way, I've stood behind a podium, obviously. I've taken questions rapid fire. So hopefully that's prepared me for, forums and debates that might be coming up in the next 7 weeks before the primary. But ultimately, like I said, if I come in second, that's great. It's like winning. So now I want to introduce you to some real winners. The first folks that I'm going to bring out tonight are a couple, spoiler alert, and they are Amy Stevenson and Scott Bateman. Amy and Scott, there Hello. They are. Hi. Hi. So Amy and Scott were the first Jeopardy folks I ever met. And at the time, it was Amy who had been on Jeopardy and been a champion, but I had known Scott on Twitter because he's also an illustrator, an animator, a filmmaker, and just a really cool guy. So I started following him on Twitter, and then I got to know Amy, and then she went on Jeopardy. So I want you both to tell us what game shows you've been on, how many games you've won, and how much money, because I know everybody wants to know about the money.
Go ahead. I was on Jeopardy. I won 2 games for a total of $33,799, which was a load of fun. And then I was also on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I won $1,000 on that, which is what happens when you're almost to the final round and you miss something.
We'll learn more about that in a bit. And Scott, what about you?
Hi, I won 1 game on Jeopardy, and I won $30,001. And then also, that was in, I think, 2015 or 16. And then it's also on Millionaire, after she had been on Millionaire, and I won $100,000 on Millionaire, which was surreal, but a lot of fun, a very fun day.
And a Disney cruise.
Oh yeah, and we won a Disney cruise.
That's not nothing to, don't hide that. We have to talk about that in a bit. Okay, so you guys sit tight. And the next person we're going to bring on is Kristen Sauceville. You want to turn on your mic? And there Hi. She is. Hi.
Hi.
Kristen, I met through the Jeopardy network, so we'll talk about that in a little while. It's a secret cabal. No, it's not.
Yes.
It's a lot of amazing, smart people. Kristen, tell us what game shows you've been on, how many games you won, and how much money you won.
So I was on Jeopardy in 2015. I won 5 games and $94,201. In 2017, I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and I won $5,000 there. And then just this past January, I was on the new primetime version of The Chase, and I won $72,500 because Ken Jennings could not catch me.
Amazing. We're going to have to talk about that later as well. And then Kristen, you kind of stepped over the port. You were a 5-day champion on Jeopardy, so that means you also competed in
the Tournament of Champions. Yes, I was a quarterfinalist in the 2015 Tournament of Champions.
Awesome. And last but definitely not least is Carrie Green. And Carrie, turn on your awesome. Hello, welcome.
Hi.
And Carrie is another awesome Jeopardy champion. Why don't you tell us what, have you been on other game shows or just Jeopardy? Just Jeopardy.
No,
Just
just
Jeopardy.
Jeopardy. And I never had the desire to be on any other show. So it was kind of interesting meeting all these people in the community who that was important to them. So, but no, I was always a Jeopardy girl from day one. I was on in 2015. I won 6 games in regular play, and then I was in the Tournament of Champions, and I came in 3rd that November.
And so how
Let's see,
much
the
did you win?
total, it was 147, I think 598 in my regular games, and then 50,000 for 3rd in the TOC.
It's almost $200,000
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah.
Not
It was a bad
bad.
tax year, but it was a good year.
So a lot of people also know I'm a comic book nerd and a superhero nerd. So I want to ask you guys what your origin story is in terms of game shows. And, you know, how did you get into this thing? Like, people I'm sure are curious, like, how does someone get into this? So whoever wants to go first, go ahead and just sort of raise your hand and jump in.
I can start.
Well,
I just,
yeah,
sorry. I, you know, with Jeopardy in particular, I can't remember a time in my life when I wasn't watching it. You know, I was a little kid when it debuted, and it was just always on in my house. And, you know, Alex Trebek and the contestants who, especially the ones who did really well, were people that, you know, we kind of looked up to, like, wow, what an accomplishment. And so this is something that I've wanted since I was a little kid.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me, except when Jeopardy came back on the air with Alex Trebek, I was not a little kid. I was already 17, which dates me, but that's okay. And so I watched it with my family and, you know, before I went to college. Then I watched it with my roommates. Then I watched it with my significant other, who eventually became my husband, and then my children. And I always watched it. And it was always something that, you know, I thought in the back of my head, you know, I'm not bad at this. And then, I don't know, one day I said, oh, an online test? I can do that. And but I remember game shows. Like, I remember watching Joker's Wild when my mother folded the laundry when I was 3 years old. So they've definitely been part of my family's viewing, you know, habits for a good long time. I think my mom's watching tonight. So hi, Mom.
Hi.
Yeah,
And how about Amy? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, watched game shows, lots of game shows. Jeopardy was, of course, my mother's favorite. If she had not been, say, agoraphobic, I think she might have done very well, but she would never have gone out for it. But she would have been a champion, I think. And I didn't really try for it until we met Bob Harris. We got to become friends with Bob Harris, who is a famous champion.
Wrote a book.
Through we got to know him through the Funny Times in Cleveland. And so we were familiar with his book, and I thought, oh, you know, this seems like something I could actually like learn how to do. And so, yes, online test, don't have to travel somewhere to take a paper test and say, well, we thought you might have done well, but your handwriting is terrible, so too bad.
So kind of the online test kind of opened the door for people who might have been, yeah. And then so Scott,
you know, I also grew up, you know, as a young child watching game shows in the afternoon with my mom. You know, stuff like Match Game, very inappropriate for a child.
Match Game. Let me just take a drink. Love Match Game.
Bill of the Century was another one. High Rollers with Alex Trebek was also one we watched. But then when Jeopardy came back on, my mom and I would watch that, and Wheel of Fortune. She liked Wheel, I liked Jeopardy, but we'd watch each other's show. And then, you know, after college, 1989, I actually tried out. Jeopardy came to Portland, where I was living. And you could only get on Jeopardy at that time by going to a place where they were having auditions. And they came to Portland that year, and I tried out, and I did not pass the test, and I did not get an audition. And then some 20-some years later, I got on. So that was great.
That's amazing. I don't think I've ever met anybody who actually auditioned like when the van came into town, you know, or the bus or whatever it was. That's really cool. You know, so it sounds like everybody had a childhood where they grew up watching game shows with their family, and the same with me. My parents watched Jeopardy every night, and one of the things that really drives me nuts is that we'll be sitting on the couch if we're visiting, and we of course will watch Jeopardy. And in my house, we have a rule because of course, when you're learning to be on Jeopardy, you have to practice, right? That we don't shout out the answer until Alex, finished reading the question, right? We don't do that. My mother, forget it. She just yells it like, so every time we watch it together, it's just, I just sit there like, love you, Mom. If you're watching, Mom, I love you so much. She knows it. It's not a secret from my mom. So yeah, how many times did it take you each to get on Jeopardy? I had taken the online test twice. The first time I didn't get an audition, second time I did, and then I was on like within weeks. It was really kind of a little shocking. But what about you guys?
I got on, I mean, I did like late 80s, early 90s, I did the in-person thing, which you had to do back then. I took the online test maybe, I think it was the third time that I took it, that I got on the show, or got the call to get an audition, which we had to go to Boston for, which was very strange. But it was, the audition itself was very fun, so.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. How about Carrie, Kristen, how many was it the first time or?
I took the online test twice, didn't hear anything back the first time. And then the second time I got an audition, which was in May of 2013. And they told us, 18 months you're in the contestant pool. It was 19 months to the day when they called me and said I was going to be on the show. So I had pretty much resigned myself to, okay, it's not happening this time. I guess I'll take the online test again. So it was definitely a surprise.
The first time I auditioned was 2006, and I want to say that was one of the first years that they did the online test. It was still kind of like an in-between phase where they did the online test, but then they actually weeded people out after the written test. I know we'll get into more specifics in a minute, but it was kind of this like in between of how they used to do it and how they do it now. So I did have the in-person audition in 2006, but I didn't get the call. I had a baby in 2007 and another baby in early 2009. So I stopped taking the online test for a while. My husband took it. He got on the show. And then after he was on, I started taking the online test again. I got an audition in 2014, which was nice because that was the 1 year that they had one near me in Philadelphia. And so I didn't have to go very far for the in-person. And then I got the call about 5 weeks later.
It's funny because when you leave the audition, they tell you, okay, you've got like 18 months, and so you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to put this out of my mind. And then like 3 weeks later, you look at your phone during a staff meeting and it says, Cooper, what was the
Culver
city?
City.
Culver City, California.
Yep.
The only number I've known from Culver City is the Jeopardy people.
Yeah.
And then
I
you
was
get the
such
voice.
a dork.
Yeah.
I was such a dork when I answered it because I saw Culver City, and I was also the one who picked up the house line when my husband got the call, and so I knew what Culver City meant, and so I pick up and it's like, hi, yes, I want to do it, thank you. And then Amy, the coordinator, she kind of a long pause and she's like, okay, I want to confirm some of your information. I felt like such a dork.
So actually the day that I auditioned, Amy and Scott and I had lunch afterwards. They came and visited, which I think may have helped me get cast, because there does seem to be, and this is a pro tip for those of you out there thinking about getting cast, they do ask for recommendations from past champions. So a champion can email one of the coordinators, one of the people who contestant coordinators, and say, hey, I know this person who took the test, and they can maybe bump you up a little bit. It's just something to keep in mind. And now I figure I'm probably going to get emails from people, and you guys might too. Sorry. But I found the audition experience to be fun. I mean, it was a little nerve-wracking, but pretty fun. Carrie, why don't you tell us about your audition experience?
The written test was cake. It was much easier than the one online, I thought. I wasn't sure I missed any. That was great.
Hold on, let's stop you there. People don't know, right? So when you get there, they make you take another 50-question test to make sure that you are actually the person who scored well enough on the test to get the audition. You haven't had someone else take the test for you, and then you show up and and they take your picture. They take your picture and they stick it on your application.
That was less exciting. And then the interview, then you do like a practice, round of Jeopardy, but they're really not interested in, can you answer the questions? They're interested in your stage persona and the interview part, and are you an interesting person? And I am an introvert, so I found that excruciatingly awful. I did not find it fun because that's, completely counter to my personality. So it was really, in the end, very empowering, because I got out of there and I said, well, it might not come to anything, but at least I did that. And I've never done that before. And that's not something I ever would have done if I didn't want this show so much.
And then you end up being a finalist in the Tournament of Champions. So, you're an introvert and you end up going as far as you can go in the game. Like, you were on TV more than all of us combined.
Yeah, it was, it was like you knew what you were supposed to do. There was, it wasn't hard to figure out. What the interview portions, that was a little more nerve-wracking because, you're trying to be funny and, congenial and not, offend anybody. And it's like, you just want that to be over and get back to answering the questions because that's something you know how to do well.
Kristen, what about you?
Yeah. So, no, I had a great time at my audition because I guess I'm kind of like on the opposite approach. I'm super extroverted and I was so excited to meet all these other trivia nerds. And there was one woman at my audition that she and I just hit it off with, and we sat up front and, we just were joking around back and forth, having a great time. She got the call a week before I did. So worked out well for both of us.
I think that energy, they're looking for a certain energy, and you can go too far with the energy just based on what I saw in my interview, in my audition experience too, right? So Amy and Scott, tell us about your audition experiences.
I had 2 tests and 2 auditions, and mine were we were living in New York City at the time, and mine were in, the same Hilton on 6th Avenue, I'm sure in the same ballroom. And it was very fun. It was sort of fun to see people sort of share that nervous energy. And the first time I thought, well, it seemed like it went really well, but who knows, and I didn't hear anything. Toward the end of that contestant period, there was a lot of chaos going on. And so I thought, please don't call. I won't be able to go. And so then the next January, I took the test and got an audition notice pretty quickly thereafter and said, yes, got to the audition, and they do a little door prize. And we had just, I think we and the prize was the Nintendo Wii Jeopardy game, and I won it because I'd happened to. And they're sort of testing, were you watching the show last night? And I hadn't. I knew whatever the answer was. So we bought a Wii secondhand, and it turns out that the Wii game was not very good for practice, but it was fun to play in general. But it was very fun energy, and I enjoyed being there. It was nice to see and to realize, they don't just want to test my smarts. They want to know that I'm not going to say, to make a long story short, Alex.
Right.
It's interesting though, because I think over the years they've gotten a little given more latitude to contestants as far as being a little more out there. Would you guys agree with that?
The only thing I really want to add to what everyone said about the audition process is that the Jeopardy people are amazing. They're top notch. They make everyone feel so comfortable. They're pros at this. They know how, when someone's a little freaked out, they calm them down. They just make it all so fun, and they're just the best people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true.
And that continued on the show as well, because, whenever somebody would have a rough, round or something, they would come out and they'd be like, okay, you're just a tiny little bit behind, just, relax a little bit. Here's a drink. And they were really, really good at making everybody feel comfortable. It makes for better television if people aren't standing there staring at the camera doing nothing. So.
Oh yeah.
Anybody who's in Gen X remembers the Televisionitis thing, right, with the Brady Bunch. And I think that everybody who goes on a game show probably has that moment, right? Jen, if you could show the pictures. So one of the things that you get to do when you're actually on the show is you had, I should say, in the past, you had your moment with Alex, and that's me. And those glasses actually are part of the reason I think I also got cast, because Maggie, who was the contestant producer at the time, who was at the audition, loved my glasses. Or maybe she was testing me to see how I would react. but she asked if she could try them on, and she was kind of going crazy about them. And I shared them with her, and we chatted and everything. So I don't know, maybe that helped. But I just want to say, everybody tells you it's not humid in California, and that is a lie. You can just look at my hair, and that is proof. Oh, Amy's very small. Okay. But there's Amy with Alex. And so, and you can see the set change over the years too, because the year I was on was the 30th anniversary, and there was a new set, different colors. But that moment where so everybody's first game, you don't really meet Alex until this moment. And then he just sort of comes up next to you, maybe puts his hand on the, on your shoulder, just on your back, and kind of leans in and says, hello. What was that moment like for everybody? What was that moment at first time?
For me, it was a little awkward because I was in the red at that point. And so I think I've always read this, like when you see the picture of me in a second, I've always felt like there's a little bit of pity in his eyes, like, oh, you're trying, And I'm just sitting here like, this is my picture. I better smile like I'm actually doing okay, They're not going to let me take another, so.
Well, your hair looks amazing. And
thank you.
The makeup artists on the show are also I left that makeup on like all night. I was like taking selfies and. Oh yeah.
They were fantastic.
I think Alex looks kind of confused in my picture, which maybe because I was like, oh, look, we're doing a picture. I was so focused on don't fall off the podium, look at the red light. So yeah, it was like over before I even knew it had happened.
Well, and that's one of the things that's interesting too, is that make it easier for the cameras panning back and forth, there are little adjustable risers behind the podium. So if you, like me, are height impaired, you're going to be a good, 6-7 inches foot off the ground, depending on the other contestants that you're appearing with. And I had very tall men on all three of my shows, so I was definitely up there. So yeah,
it was the opposite. Yeah.
Don't fall off. Don't fall off.
Not afraid of heights. Good.
It was the opposite for me because I am tall. I'm 5'9", and most of the people I played were either my height or shorter. And it wasn't until my very last game that they had to raise me up. And I do think that kind of threw me off a little bit. It's like, oh wow, I'm elevated. I could fall off this thing now. What is this? This is new. Because for 5 games I hadn't needed it. So.
That's interesting. I wonder, I'm going a little off my script here, but let's talk a little bit about gender, because it seems like there are a lot more women contestants now than there used to be. And I do give Jeopardy a lot of credit for making the effort to get more women on. And you can see that women win all the time. So it's not like, oh, well, they just weren't up to it or whatever. Did for the women identifying people in this chat, did you sense any of that? Did you feel any of that when you were competing? Either the weight of being a woman and, I need to, because I was, of course, now it's a little less frequent, but generally it would be like 2 guys and a woman, or like that it was only one woman at a time. Like you could only have one woman. So I'm just curious if anybody had any experiences with that competing.
I didn't feel the weight of gender much. I thought my games were pretty well mixed, but I did feel old in comparison to many of the contestants. Not just that they were mostly younger than me, but some of them were amazingly younger than me. And definitely that made a difference as far as speed went on the buzzer, I always felt. But it was just really kind of daunting to see these young, who I would think of as kids, who knew all this stuff. I was like, man, at that age, I didn't know that stuff. Where did they know that stuff from? So that was kind of, when I did well, it was like, all right, one for the old broad, that much more than the gender stuff.
I don't know that I felt like the weight of gender, but I felt the perks of it, I guess. Like when I did well, I was like, yay, a woman's doing well, but I didn't feel like added pressure because of it. I only had one game that I was the only woman in, and maybe I felt it a little bit more during that one that I wanted to do well, but I didn't feel weight or pressure because of gender.
I wouldn't say I did. There were in all three of my games, there was me, another woman, and one man. I beat a woman to become champion, and then I lost to a woman, a librarian. And she was very mild-mannered and friendly, and so the Times Square lawyer, who was the third person, never saw her coming. I think he was more surprised than I was, whereas I thought librarian, I'm in trouble.
The librarian, there are a lot of lawyers and librarians on the show, and the librarians win a lot because I mean, come on, it's just accumulated knowledge. Yeah, and teachers. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So I want to ask this question to Kristen and to Amy and Scott. Which is harder, being on Jeopardy or watching your spouse compete on Jeopardy?
Watching your spouse. Watching your spouse is so much harder because you have no control. You can't do anything. You can't, tell them the answers that that they don't. And the things that they know and the things that they don't know. You can see when the categories come up, you can think, oh no, why did this have to be in his game? And yeah, at least when you're on the stage, how you do is up to you.
Yes. Wait, both times I watched him, there was a lunch break between his two games. And so I was just like, okay, I'm ravenous, I'm nervous. What can I eat? Can I eat anything? I have to eat something. and the other family people, other people who were with me were so kind and so understanding because they could tell I was just a ball of nerves in both instances.
Yes, so stressful sitting in the audience, and final comes up and you're like, I don't know if she knows that or not. I don't know that. Oh, shoot.
So I'm love this. I'm having a lot of fun. Okay. I hope other people are too. And yeah, so I hope if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And so I need to know about the Tournament of Champions experience, because that is, it seems to me, something that's so completely different from the everyday. Like the audience is composed of different types of people and just the whole pressure cooker of it. One of you start with, either Carrie or Kristen, just kind of tell us how the format works. And, because I know there's quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. So just start out by giving us a little rundown of how it works and sort of what your experience was like. And
so it's basically 2 days of taping for 2 weeks of shows. And just like the regular games, they tape 5 games in 1 day. So for the tournament, there are the quarterfinal games, which are basically the first 5 games. So there's 15 people that compete in those, 3 in each game. And from that, you get 5 winners. And then they take the 5 winners and the 4 highest non-winners, highest scoring non-winners, to make up the 3 games that are the semifinals. And so the first day of taping is all quarterfinals. And at the end of that day, you have your slate of semifinalists. And then there are also 2 alternates in case, somebody wakes up in the morning and they're throwing up and they can't go on, whatever. And then after the semifinals, you get 3 winners from each of those games, and those 3 people compete in the finals, which is a 2-day cumulative event. And my experience was, it was like the best summer camp one could ever imagine. But I also went into it with absolutely no expectation. I did not expect anything. I didn't expect to win a game, much less be in the final. So it was a chance to spend time with people that I had come to know online that I thought were great. And, they put us all up together in a hotel and, so we had drinks the night before and, talked about how nervous we were. And it just was, it was like we rode on a bus to go to the studio together. And it really felt like the summer camp I never got to go to.
That's such a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so
I knew it was going to be, I knew it was going to be a special experience because my husband had done that and I had gotten to travel with him when he was on it. And I saw how much all the contestants bonded with each other and how so many of the people became, friends to this day. So I was really excited to have that opportunity for myself too.
So Kristen, you didn't make it to the next day of taping. Obviously, you were a quarterfinalist.
I did though, because I was the alternate.
Oh, you were the alternate. So you got to be.
I don't recommend that. No, yeah, that was kind of it was terrible.
For someone to get sick.
Which is awful because all of a sudden, like, you know these people and you like them, and it's like, well, wait a minute. The only way I get to play is if something terrible happens to somebody that I like, and so it's this whole thing. You know, it's hard to process. Yeah.
I feel bad for the alternate that that doesn't get to play even in the quarterfinals,
Yes.
because they actually bring an alternate out in
Yep.
case one of the original 15 can't tape. So that person is there, like sort of hangs out with everybody, watches everybody, but has no expectation that they're going to get to participate by playing even one game.
Right.
So yeah, I felt really bad for him.
So Carrie, who were the finalists the year that you were in it?
So it was me and Matt Jackson and Alex Jacob. And when you bring up the podiums, that's very funny because Alex is quite tall, and Matt and I are much less so. And for the first final game, they adjusted everybody's podiums and they said, "So how does that feel? Do you feel okay?" And Matt said, "Nope, I'm up way too high." I was like, "That's exactly how I feel, Matt."
So you were like, we can be a little shorter. It's okay. Or did they?
Exactly.
Did they take you down?
The cameraman might have to work a little harder this time.
Go get a chair for Alex, right? He can sit down. Yeah.
We talked a lot after that about why the podiums didn't also sink into the floor. Now that would be some cool engineering, That
would be useful. Yeah.
See, I think that's one of the gender things, because it's women that are generally shorter and they make you go up on one of those things as opposed to making the taller gentlemen get lower. Okay. So you go out there and you're in this crucible and you came out as a finalist and you were happy with that because you were like, hey, I didn't really have any expectations, or by that point were you like, I could win this thing?
No, actually, after seeing both of them play, I was like, I need to survive. I don't want to faint. I was exhausted by that point because the semifinal games, one of them took a really long time. Lunch took forever to come. You're watching movies back in the green room, and so there's this constant barrage of noise going on. And I mean, it's not like it's offensive or anything, but it's a lot of stimuli all day long. And it was definitely, I just wanted it to be over. Alex played so dominantly that it was not a particularly fun experience, either of those final games either. Whereas the other games, were competitive and they were fun to watch. The ones that I wasn't in, and then, the ones that I was in were fun to play. So the two final games were kind of a different experience. I mean, not that would trade it or that I have any complaints about anyone. I think they played brilliantly and I was proud to be part of their company, but I was definitely outmatched and it felt that way.
Speaking of which, every Jeopardy contestant loses at some point. So what was it like for you to lose that first time? For some of us, that's the last time. And how long until you finally get over it? Because I don't know, it's been 8 years. I sometimes think I'm over it and sometimes, not.
I knew I was going to lose my last game when I saw Final Jeopardy, the subject popping up, composers. And I'm like, this has been fun. I have had a good time here. I couldn't even be mad because, not only with the specific clue that it was, not only did I have to know a composer, you had to name two. So it's like, okay, this is like my worst topic and you're going to make me come up with two names for it. I got one of them, but they don't give half credit. So at that point, I was pretty much at peace with it. I had, done what I had really wanted to accomplish. I wanted to win at least 5. I wanted to make the Tournament of Champions, and I had done that. So I was okay.
It was disappointing to lose, but at the same time, it wasn't surprising. It was my third game, so I had 2 wins, so that was good. I was a distant third going into final because, librarian and lawyer. And I got final right, which was better than if I had missed it. Like, it wasn't enough to take me even into second place, although that was, if I'd bet $1 more, I could have, but I have a feeling the extra 1,000 meant a little bit more to the lawyer who really thought he was going to win this one. And I don't mean to disparage him. Like, you don't know what you don't see coming until you're taken down by a librarian, so it was, and I think it wasn't, I was a little disappointed that I didn't get to go further and become a champion, or a tournament champion, but I was still proud of what I had done. Whereas Millionaire was much harder to get over because that was much more of a loss. So I think that if it was the first game that I lost it, I think that would have been much harder.
Yeah, it's going into my second final, I was in the lead, but it wasn't a runaway. It was my next opponent was maybe a few thousand behind me, so I knew I was going to have to get this to be able to win, probably. And the Final Jeopardy category came up, and it was Dante's Inferno. I have never read Dante's Inferno. Dante's Inferno never came up in all of my studying for Jeopardy. But I ended up, and I thought about the wager for a while, and I decided to just bet big, just in case there's like there's about Dante's Inferno that I don't know that I know, which is often true of things like that. But I missed it, and my opponent, who was right behind me, got it right, and he was like, again, speaking about the age thing, he was less than half my age, just out of college, but he had probably just read it, so he was there for him to win.
Maybe it's just when you're one and done, you're sort of like you're never at peace.
I felt like I did, considering the people I faced and the questions I faced, I felt like I did every bit as well as I could have, and I don't have any regrets or feel bad about it. I just, with what I faced, I did the best I could.
Carrie?
Yeah, I was just, I was thrilled to win 5. After that, it was like, I'm just here for the, because by then, again, I was exhausted. It was getting towards the end of my second day of taping, and it was just kind of like, this is a great ride, but I might want to get off someday. So it was, because it all just happens so quickly. You don't have time to even really experience it because they are just boom, boom, boom. Okay, you have 5 minutes to change. And if you want to go to the bathroom, you do it now, and then you're back here. And so it just went very quickly and was very tiring. And in the end, it's a good thing that I lost when I did, because the next game, so Christopher Hurt beat me, and then Alex Jacob was the one who beat him. So having played Alex later, I'm glad that I got to wait. That was fine to wait for that experience.
Hillary, it's Jen.
Yes.
From us. There is a question from YouTube.
Yes.
Would you like me to?
From Ben Youngerman, is that right?
Yes, you can see that.
Yes. So
right.
speaking, Scott actually mentioned studying, and I must admit that I did not study so much, but Ben Youngerman would like to know, what are your studying techniques for the test and then before the actual show? Any tips there from folks?
Watching the actual show is a very good preparation because you get a sense for the feel and the tenor of the questions. They're not necessarily easy, but they're not obscure. They're not minutia for the most part. It also gives you a feel for how they're phrased, and you get practice in looking for the this, which is a very important, this, blah, 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 this Queen of England, that helps a lot. Bob Harris's book, Prisoner of Trebekistan, has some really good guidance that I followed on how to do that. And in addition to studying subject, I practiced standing up for that long, which was important because I was just getting over about a plantar fasciitis, and it could have been a very painful day if I had not accustomed myself to that. I could have studied a whole lot more, so I'll defer to people who knew more.
I just kind of want to build on what you said there about watching the show being a great prep, because I think sometimes I almost think of Jeopardy as a word association game. Like, there are only so many presidents, only so many countries, only so many Shakespeare plays, and only so many different ways to ask about them. And like, one example that I always like to give is like that they kind of pin facts together. I've noticed there'll oftentimes be 3 facts. They'll give you 2, they'll ask for the 3rd. So 1912, Titanic, White Star Line. I cannot tell you how many clues I have seen over the years where they gave you 2 of those and you had to give the 3rd. And so I think if you watch a lot, you start to see which kind of facts go together, you know. And then also on top of that, I did a lot of Sporkle quizzes, and like Amy said, practice watching the show standing up, you know, at some distance away from the TV so that I could get used to looking at a screen that was farther away, saying the answers out loud in the form of a question, studying how to wager because I was not so great at math going into that. And I know that that could make or break. And in my 5th game, I think it did make a difference where if I had wagered differently, it could have gone very differently. Yeah. And practicing doing that, you know, just trying to get yourself through the game at home, mimicking as much as possible how it's going to be in the studio.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with the 3 points of information and seeing that pattern over and over and over again. And I didn't really realize that until I had my audition and I went home, and then for 19 months I did not watch Jeopardy, but they were all on my TiVo. I don't know. After the audition, I was like, okay, I think that chapter of my life is behind me now. But they were all on my TiVo just in case. And when I got the call in December, I had a month basically until I was going to tape. So I watched every single one of those 300 and something games. So basically for 5 hours a day, I watched Jeopardy. And those patterns immediately jump out when you're watching that many games over and over. It's like, oh, yeah, right. I remember this show with so-and-so 4 months ago, and they want that same 3 points of information. Now they're asking about this one instead of that one. So you're definitely right. But I never realized that until I watched all those games put together. I studied things that were finite, that were weaknesses, like world capitals. It was like, okay, there's only a certain number of world capitals. I can study those. You know, things that I knew nothing about, I didn't bother with. It's like, I am never going to know all of the sports teams and where they came from. And, you know, now for the tournament, I did try to kind of expand my horizons a bit. But for the, you know, regular games themselves, I just stuck to it because I only had a month. So it was kind of like, I know what I'm capable of, and, you know, the small things I could handle.
I'd love to add in 2 things about this, actually. One is that often in the writing of the question, there's a little pun or a little word clue about what the answer might be. And that's, if you can get that really fast, you've got the answer. And it's, even if you don't know the subject, you can often figure out the pun. And the other thing that Amy helped me with, which was so helpful, we went through like many old games are archived on the j-archive.org. And, you know, they're not video, but the questions are all listed there and everything. And so she would take me through an episode. I'd be standing and pretending to buzz. But the thing that really helped was that at the end of each episode, she would have me practice wagering as if I were in all 3 of the positions that people were in. So I would know how to wager if I were like winning just by a little bit, or if I were losing but was still in the game a little bit. And I just learned a lot about the best wagers for different situations, and that helped me win my first game.
That's a great point. And, you know, speaking of online resources, so the J board is really a good online resource. And, you know, I mean, you decide how much you want to interact, but there's lots of great information there. And then Prisoner Trebekistan was the book that you guys referenced. So I want to mention that again. And then there is somebody who really only blogs about the wagering, right?
Yeah, Keith Williams does the final wager, and it seems to be in hiatus. Yeah, and then Fritz Holznagel has the Secrets of the Buzzer. Fritz Holznagel did a whole thing where, you know, all of this experimenting on what makes you, like, how can you reduce your reaction time, and then he has a whole book about that too.
Yeah, because the buzzer is the other piece of it, and we have another question from the chat, so I want to bring that up as well. But you know, learning how to use the buzzer. They give you a pen that has a red thing. It's a Jeopardy pen. You get it at your audition, and they always tell you to practice with it, and that's great. But the truth is that the weight of that is nothing compared to the weight of the buzzer. And really, I would recommend doing some thumb exercises to really kind of loosen it up, because for me that was the hardest part. And I think everybody feels that. But when you're at the podium, there are these lights that light up. And when they're all lit up, you know you can buzz in. And if you buzz in before it, you are locked out for 1/8 of a second, which is enough time for your competitors to buzz in. So that little bit of timing is something you also can't really get until you do practice games beforehand, which is something we should mention also. When you're a contestant in the green room, they go over a whole bunch of stuff with you, and they have you write up some of your stories that you've also already submitted, and you sort of pick your favorite 3. I think that's how it was for me anyway. And then you don't know what Alex is actually, what we didn't know, the host is actually going to ask you, to keep it spontaneous, right? So you sort of have a feeling in your mind, it's going to be one of these 3. Here's my favorite, you might say, but then they'll ask you something completely out of left
It was
field.
off script a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, that timing thing is something that you can develop over the practice rounds that you play during the, before taping starts. And that I really got the hang of that in the practice. And I was like, okay, that I have, but I was having trouble buzzing in at first. And in that first commercial break, Maggie came up to me, put her hands on my shoulder, like breathe. And I'm like, is there something wrong with my buzzer? Is there something? She's like, no, you're good. Just take a breath. You're going to get in there. And then once you get in, and you see this when you're watching the show, right? You'll see someone and they're frustrated. And then that first time they get in, it's like, oh, and then they are able to get in over and over. And I think the other thing that I would say to folks is, don't buzz in if you don't know the answer. Don't guess. You lose money if you guess. And if so let somebody else buzz in and guess, because there's a good chance that they're going to get it wrong too, right?
I think that must be a hard skill for some people, though, because I watch people and I can tell that they don't even really want to be buzzing in. They just can't stop themselves, and they get on these rolls of going the wrong way. And I always used to worry before I was on the show, what if that happens to me? And I honestly, I don't have an answer for that. It just didn't, thank goodness. But I think that, for some people, it must not come naturally, that decision making, in your split second of time to be able to decide, are you going to ring in?
And as Maggie put it, there are times when you buzz in because you are sure you know the answer. And then she's like, you can watch the answer just leave the person's brain out their ear. It's like, you just look at the look on their face like, I knew it. Where did it go? Karina wants to know, how long is the small talk at the end of the show? And did you get to talk to Alex afterwards? So who wants to start with telling a couple of Alex stories?
When I did it, they were doing it where after the show, after the end, they brought the 3 people out, and we were all sort of standing in a little arc, and it was arranged like where the champion, second, third were. And the first game that I played was the Tuesday game. So there'd been a game before that. One of many interesting highlights of that game was a category called Dr. Masseuse Rhymes, where you had to come up with, the clues were in doggerel and you had to get the word right. And it was very challenging for everyone. Like the one player lost points because they realized he'd mispronounced trapezius, which not only was a mispronunciation, but didn't scan in the doggerel. So we all got out there after my game and I was sort of amped up like, I won, I can't believe it, this is exciting. And Alex said, well, at least we didn't have that terrible Dr. Masseuse Rhymes category. And several moments venting about that. I'm like, fair, good point.
Who else has a story about the chit chat after?
I didn't. It's funny because after I win, one of my opponents was a Navy lawyer, and Alex was very supportive of the troops and loved the troops, and so he wanted to hear he wanted to talk to her about and thank her for her service and find out what she did and stuff. That's very perfect. That's very on brand for Alex, and I appreciated that he did that. And in my second game after I lost, he talked to the new champion. So I didn't chat with him at all. I just got to watch him chat with others.
Right.
What is it like? Yeah, I mean, what is it? What kind of rapport do you develop with Alex when you're a multi-day champion like that? Because he's obviously very professional and he doesn't really mingle with the contestants or anything, obviously. But when you've been on that many times, I mean, you kind of run out of chit chat, you run out of outfits. Like, do you run out of? What is it? What is that like?
I found that his chit chat afterwards ranged a great deal. Sometimes it had to do with the game. Sometimes it had to do with something completely different. He noticed my family in the audience. He's like, "Wow, your family's really, making a scene out there." And so, "Oh yeah, there's so and so and so and so." He was able to talk about all sorts of different things. He was very good at off the cuff conversations on lots of topics, and I think that's why especially not at the end of his career, but in other periods of his career, the interviews were good. They were really good because he was genuinely interested in different things. One of my favorite stories about the Alex interview was Michael Bilo, the champion that I beat. He was a graduate student in I can't remember if I think it was computer science. And Alex completely disregarded everything that Michael had on his card. And he said, "So let's talk about artificial intelligence." And Michael afterwards was like, "I don't know anything about artificial intelligence. That's not what I study." But and we're like, "No, you sounded great, Michael."
That's so funny. He asked me about my organic garden. And then he started asking me, "Well, do you grow this? Do you grow that?" And every vegetable he asked me was something I did not grow. And I was like,
"How
"Oh
is
my
that
God,
possible?
this is
I've seen your garden."
really going well." It was like, at the time I didn't grow zucchini. I wasn't growing potatoes. Like, I can't remember. And he mentioned potatoes. And then of course, like being from Canada, like potatoes, all of that kind of stuff.
Oh, yes.
And then like the game ran long. And so when they actually aired it, my chit chat was like 10 seconds of him saying, "So you have a garden?" And I was like, "Yep." I sat there, I was like, but I told him all about it. So funny.
Say one more thing about chatting with Alex. Chatting with people what people don't know is that during the commercial breaks that are on TV, he's actually in the studio. The audience he takes questions from the audience, which was amazing. And someone had asked him about his hobbies. I think this was actually during one of Amy's.
It was my first taping day, yes.
Yeah, and he said he likes to do a lot of home fix-up, and in fact, at that moment, he had 7 toilets in his driveway because he was repiping the whole house, and his neighbors were not happy that he had 7 toilets in his driveway. And he's like, "Oh, who cares?" But he's just such a character. And again, can speak about anything practically.
Oh yeah, I want to add to what Scott said because, whenever somebody asks me what Alex Trebek was really like, I always think first of the audience questions. And I've been in the audience for a lot of tape days. I was there, when my husband was in the Tournament of Champions. I was there for my tape days. I was there for my Tournament of Champions. And like Carrie said, they take 5 shows a day, but they go through 2 audiences. So there's the first audience that sees the first 3 games, then there's a lunch break, and then a second audience is brought in for the last 2 games of the day. They ask the same questions. When he takes questions from the audience, I would say 9 out of 10, it's a repeat question, but he never, ever makes them feel that he's answered it a million times. He always answered it in a way that I'm sure each person asking felt like he was answering it for the first time. And I always admired that about him, his ability to make the experience meaningful for the people who were there.
So true.
It certainly seems like the number one question everybody always wants to ask any contestant, right, is what was Alex really like? So I know we've talked a lot about that. And there is a question here from someone named Priscilla Green.
Yeah, that's my mom. So I think she knows my answer to this question.
So the question is, did the celebrity that followed the airing of your shows surprise you? And I mean, I'll go first and just say that having been a one and doneer, I was in every local news outlet. Like, of course, they don't know how you've done when they interview you because you can't tell them, right? And they always want to do the articles before your air time. So I was just shocked. But, if you Google me now, you'll see this, Bethlehem woman appearing on Jeopardy. It's always like that, right? In the local paper, it's like, it's like Delaware woman appearing on Jeopardy. And then anytime something happens with Jeopardy, they call you again. So when Alex passed away, the local paper called me again to interview me and ask me about my experience. But so, yeah, I think that Amy and I, at least, we were kind of in the before social media really got wild with Jeopardy. Jeopardy had been avoiding social media. Like, they didn't want to engage. You weren't supposed to talk about the fact you were taping, like that you had gone out, you were supposed to not tell anyone on Facebook. And now it seems it's much more out there. And Kristen and Carrie, talk a little bit about how, the social media reaction to your appearances and kind of all of that.
Well, one of my games went viral. In my second game, I was the only player in Final Jeopardy, and it just took off. It was the number one trend. That was when Facebook had trending stories still. It was the number one story there. I have a friend who's a writer for People Magazine, and he interviewed me very briefly over Facebook chat and wrote an article about it. It was shared 2 million times just the next day alone. I got a call from a reporter at TMZ. They ended up not publishing it, but I'm still, I'm sitting there volunteering in my son's kindergarten classroom, cutting out some laminated shapes in the hallway while I'm talking with TMZ on the phone. It was pretty surreal.
What about you, Terry?
I was surprised at the local support, and I think Kristen and I share coming from small states that are not necessarily known for putting a bunch of Jeopardy contestants on the podium. So I was interviewed by television and by radio, and as I won games, they would call back and put me on the morning show again. Oh, you're up to 3 games now, and
Yep.
I judged a Star Spangled Banner singing contest at the mall. That sort of thing, that was surprising to me. Having a few people notice me at the grocery store, not so surprising, but the kind of just how people felt that I belong to the state, and I went out there and I, said something nice for New Hampshire. And I mean, I felt really good about that. That was a nice thing to do.
That's awesome. So we're sort of winding down in terms of chatting, and I do want to get to our trivia quiz to now that everybody's gotten all the information, and give everybody a chance to try their luck at doing a little bit of what the online test is like. But I do want to bring up something that is the current favorite topic certainly among Jeopardy contestants. And, it's not a secret. There are private groups of Jeopardy contestants in social media, so we can chat and support each other, because sometimes social media isn't so nice about contestants. So we've all got each other's backs, which is amazing. It's become a real community that I feel lucky and honored to be a part of. But let's spill the tea a little bit about the current favorite topic, which is the guest hosts, right?
Yes.
Can we talk about the guest hosts? Let's give this a few minutes. Okay. So at this point, we have seen, we've seen Ken Jennings, then the executive producer, Mike.
Yes.
Mike
Yeah.
Richards. Yep.
Mike Richards.
Katie Couric, Dr. Oz, and now night 2 of
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah.
So I think the general consensus was Ken did fine, right? He did a good job. Yeah. By that point, you had already beaten him, right, Kristen, on the chase? When he or not?
Yeah.
When did he? When did
we
he take
taped
the
in
chase?
November? Yeah, we taped in mid-November. Yeah. So yeah, that's the guy I beat hosting Jeopardy.
So, okay, I just have to. Okay, sidetracking a little bit here. What is it like to beat Ken Jennings? Because only you and one other person have ever done that. So what was that like?
We've had a couple. If you add up the other shows he's been on, I know Monica 2 beat him on 500 Questions, and Jen ended up beating him on the chase later in the season as well. But it felt so good. It felt really good. I turned to my teammate James, who was the co-winner along with me, and it's like, we beat Ken Jennings, and Ken said, "Don't go calling yourselves the co-goats now." And I kept thinking, if you have to say it, dude, that says a lot.
But that is, I just say like that is just puts you on a whole nother level in terms of the game show pantheon. Come on, there's a very small. On one hand, you can count the number of people who can beat Ken Jennings, right? So what do we think so far about these guest hosts?
I am sorry.
No, go ahead, Kristen.
Okay. I read about all of the preparation that Aaron Rodgers has devoted to it. If you haven't heard, you need to look up one of these articles. The Ringer had a great article about all of the prep that he did, and he watched hundreds of episodes, and he had his TV muted and was reading the questions out loud, and then he would listen to Alex, and he took pages of notes on every little thing Alex would say for correct answers, incorrect answers, every single situation. And I think this is awesome. This is a guy at the peak of his NFL career, and he states openly that he wants the permanent job. And he even thinks he could do both at the same time. But I still love the idea of a world where a superstar would walk away from football to host the Nerd Show. I love that narrative.
I love it. I think of who I've seen so far, we haven't actually seen Aaron play yet just because scheduling has been bad this week. But Ken Jennings did great. I think he was better off the bat than the first Alex episodes, which aired on Netflix. Last year, actually. He was better and more prepared than Alex was at his first episodes. And I would watch with Ken all the time. I would watch if it were Katie all the time as well. The producer did a fine job, and we did not watch Dr. Oz.
Yeah.
There was
that's exactly sums it up for me too. I wouldn't say that any of them made me think, oh, this is it. This is the person who should host this show. I'm still kind of experiencing cognitive dissonance when Johnny announces and it's not Alex. It's like, oh wait, that's not right. Maybe that will always be the case. I don't know.
Yeah, we did watch. We watched the Aaron Rodgers, his first show this morning, and he handled the joke made in the final Jeopardy screen very, very well. Of course, as the host, he could see the contestant writing the joke as he was, which is something. So we gave him a few seconds at least to prepare some kind of a good retort, right? But what about LeVar Burton? LeVar Burton he is.
I would love to see it.
I think there's just a huge consensus, certainly among contestants, that he would be awesome. And he totally wants the job too. Today he was tweeting out a petition that has 200,000 signatures on it. I would love to see LeVar Burton get a guest spot at least. I know Mayim Bialik is she taped episodes a few weeks ago. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. For sure.
I like the idea of it not being settled yet. I like the idea of a lot of people coming in and being able to sort of pay tribute. I was very touched by the fact that Katie Couric was not only hosting and doing a fine job, but seeing that the winning amounts were matched and benefiting cancer research.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay. So do we have any more questions from the audience, Jen?
No.
Okay. So what I wanted to do was ask one last question, and then we're going to go to the quiz. So the last question is, how has Jeopardy changed your life?
Wow, how has it not changed my life?
Right?
It gave me confidence. I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and I really didn't feel like I had a lot of direction, and I didn't have a lot of relationships that were, my own. Everything was, through my husband or through my kids, and Jeopardy helped me find my community, my geeky pals, and that has meant more than the money and more than the, fame, and more than anything about the experience was meeting all of these wonderful people, and I'm friends with so many of them still, and they're a source of strength. I mean, through this pandemic, if I didn't have this social media community of Jeopardy people, I don't know how I would have gotten through. It's been just wonderful for me. It gave me the courage to make changes in my life that I needed to make to really improve my happiness. So I'd say it's been instrumental.
I think I agree with a lot of that in terms of it giving you confidence, giving you, a sense of direction and purposeness that's driven by your accomplishments and what you can do. And, I remember sitting there in my first game and having to, wager $9,800 on whether or not I was going to get it right in order to win the game, and thinking, once you bet $9,800 on yourself and win, you can handle stuff, you can face difficult stuff. You can make better choices that will make your life better.
Yeah, all of what they said, except that, I was never a mom. But it gave me a lot more confidence. It made me feel like, and really, being able to connect with my tribe, as it were. I think that, but also it gave me, I work in marketing and I am a content person. So I'm not like the cheerful PR person that was the majority of the company where I worked. And I think it made me feel like I'm not so much a misfit, I'm a different strength, but yet I can connect with the people who really are, in the same mode I am.
Yeah, for me, it's just the community of people, just so many new friends and people who went through this crazy experience, and to have something in common, like something weird in common like that with people, is just really brought so much joy to my life. And also, it's this thing, like no one can take that away from me. It's like I've always got, I always accomplished this thing, and it's like, so I can always remind myself of that if I'm feeling low, or if I whatever. It's just like I did this thing, I can do other things, and it's just wow.
Yep.
Wow.
That sums it up. That sums it up so well.
I love it. Well, let's go to our quiz. It's time for you guys to find out if, how you out there in the audience. I hope there are some people watching. Again, thank you all for coming, for sure. So it's your turn to see, whether you could do well on the online test. The online test is 50 questions. We're just going to ask you 10. And you're going to get 10 seconds per question to answer them. We want you to just put your answers in the chat on YouTube. The prize that we have tonight is a Funko Pop of Alex Trebek.
Ooh.
Isn't that great? He's holding a Final Jeopardy card. I love it. This is going to be a random drawing for this. So if you want to be in the drawing for this, send me an email at hillaryforbethlehem@gmail.com. That's the campaign email. Just write, put me in the drawing, and then I will draw one random email and then get in touch and send it to you. So it's hillaryforbethlehem@gmail.com. Okay, and so Jen is controlling the quiz. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask one question. You're going to get 10 seconds, and then she'll put up the next slide, which is the answer. When you're taking the online quiz, you don't have to say what is, who is. You don't have to phrase it in the form of a question. So you don't have to do that in the chat either. But just, you have to remember when you're on the game show, because eventually all of you are going to get on, that you need to practice phrasing your answer in the form of a question. Okay. Okay, here we go. First question. The topic is, Jen, next slide. Poetry. Petrarch's Canzoniere contained 317 of these 14-line poems. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The answer is, the question is, what are sonnets? Okay. Next question. Topic is the Supreme Court. Traditionally, the Supreme Court begins its term on the first Monday of this month. Whoop. 10, 9, 8, 7. Jen, if you don't want me to count, you can just count to yourself and then just go to the answer. What is October? Okay, next one. These are all actual online test questions, guys. These are historically, these were taken from the real thing. So Harold II was killed in this battle in 1066. This is one of those 3-point things like Carrie and Kristen were mentioning. You've got Harold II, you've got 1066. That's the battle. All right, it's the Battle of Hastings. So again, you can connect those things. Somebody might say Battle of Hastings, and the question you'll have to answer is 1066. Next one. Musicians. Duckworth is the real last name of this Pulitzer Prize winning rapper. Scott, Scott's looking like, I don't know if I know this. I didn't know this one. Who is Kendrick Lamar? But I did know that Kendrick Lamar had won the Pulitzer Prize, and he was the only rapper I could think of who had won the Pulitzer Prize. So again, Duckworth, maybe that's kind of the one that you're not going to know, but you know Pulitzer Prize and rapper Kendrick Lamar. Okay, next one. Okay, before and after. These are like some of my least favorites. Billiards surface, where you list all the chapters of a book. Before and after. Billiards surface, where you list all the chapters of a book. What's the connection there? What is pool table of contents? These are the ones get the groans in my house anyway. It's like a. Next, the internet. This 25-year-old web service was originally called Jerry and David's Guide to the World Wide Web. What is Yahoo? And Yahoo has the exclamation point like Jeopardy does. Whenever you write Jeopardy, you have to remember the exclamation point. So that had to have an exclamation point and a question mark. Next question. Nonfiction. Okay, before I even say this, this is one of those ones that could have two really like answers that you think could be right, and you might want to wait for the first person to get it wrong. In The Restless Wave, he looked back on his years in the Senate and his run for president, and also talked about battling cancer. Who is John McCain? Scott's nodding his head like he got it right. But I was thinking, you know, with everybody being in the mindset of Joe Biden right now, you know, he lost a son to cancer, you know, he ran for president. Like, I was thinking he could be someone who somebody might think would be the answer. Next. Rhyme time. Okay, another one of these language playing with words. A frightening Spanish fortified wine. Spanish fortified wine. Oh, uh-oh. Oh, no.
Oh, good. It's the physics one.
3 point for everybody.
We're going forward instead of back. Well, now you have all the answers. Wouldn't it have been great if that had happened on my Jeopardy game? I might have done better. Can you get back to question 8? Jen? I don't know what happened. We lost Jen. I couldn't even tell you the physics one from memory. I just put that in there because for me it would have been like, oh, am I going to get this one? And then I finished with the dreaded opera question because the dreaded opera category, right? It's funny how some groups of people, it's the sports category, and for some people it's opera. But okay, so rhyme time, a frightening Spanish fortified wine. The answer is, what is scary sherry, which is a near rhyme, I think. Not quite a rhyme, but okay. And then the next question. Physics, yes. It's the measure of energy unavailable for useful work in a system. As it increases, the universe is said to be running down. You already know the answer. What is entropy?
I still forgot it already.
And our final question, the dreaded opera category. And these names, I was like, oh, that's where Zerlina comes from. Elvira warns Zerlina about the title character of this Mozart opera.
I've even seen that opera and didn't remember.
What is
that is
Giovanni?
Not my category.
So that's a selection. Again, you would do 50 of those, and you get, I think actually, do you get 15 seconds? I can't remember how much you get, how long
20,
you get for
I
each
think.
one. 20?
I think
20.
it's
So
20.
you would have had twice as much time to answer each of those, which I think is plenty of time. And speaking of time, I think we are just about out of time. I want to absolutely thank all of you so much, and thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your support of my campaign by doing this event. So appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody who donated, who got a ticket, even if you didn't come to the event live. I really appreciate that, and everybody who came to the event. I hope you had fun. You know, again, I'm my campaign is facebook.com/Hillary for Bethlehem. The email, if you want to enter yourself into the drawing for the Alex Trebek Funko Pop, is hillaryforbethlehem@gmail.com. Anybody have any last words they want to say?
I would
to the
just say
folks?
if people, I mean, don't be afraid. Take the test. It's all fun. Just go for it and see what happens. That's all I did.
Absolutely.
Especially now, the test you can take anytime, and the auditions are happening over Zoom. So you can be really comfy and secure and wherever you want to take it, not driving to another city and going into a ballroom or anything like that.
Not wearing
So easy now. Right? You can wear pajama pants now when you audition. I assume. I don't know if they make you
I am
stand up
now.
or they-
So it's another way that campaigning and Jeopardy is similar, because this is what we're doing now to campaign a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be going out and knocking on doors. My literature just arrived today. I'm really excited. I got it in Spanish and in English, thanks
Oh,
to
you
a
look
friend who did the
awesome.
translation.
That
Thank
is
you.
so cool.
Wonderful photograph by my friend Sandra Stahl, who did that. And then I have a friend who did the Spanish translation. People have been so amazing. And I thank everybody who has supported my campaign in one way or another. One last little thing about about Jeopardy is you do have to pay your way out. And they give you a discount at a hotel. It's a DoubleTree. You get the cookies, and you get little vouchers for the buffet breakfast too. And then they pick you up and they. What did you say?
You get a ride to the studio on a little bus.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they take you in a little mini bus to the studio. But when you lose, if you lose, you gotta find your way back by
Yeah.
yourself. So
They will call you
Like-
a taxi, but they don't pay for it.
that's right. So just keep that in mind. Have a little pocket change, or have the Uber app open, or whatever. But yeah, again, thank you to everybody. Thank you to my guests, my friends. I really appreciate it. And have a wonderful night. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Right.
Bye, Mom.
Yay, good job. You did great.